Hey guys, Scripture here with another video. This is a topic I have wanted to cover for a while because I find it funny when you're going through like Star Wars YouTube and stuff like that, and even Twitter and Reddit, whatever, and you find these videos and posts talking about how the Jedi were stupid, the Jedi were bad, it's the Jedi's fault. Or, for example, this guy did this video a number of years ago called The Empire Was Right, and he's got, almost 9 million views on it, so it's obviously a semi-popular perspective. And so I just wanted to cover this because I want to know where these guys are coming from, and I think it's a fun thing to talk about because it is somewhat controversial, but in kind of a silly way, obviously, right? It's not like it's like the end of the world, but I want to talk about it. So let's talk about this. So there is a guy who made a video, Coruscant Archives. I'm not trying to pick on him at all. That's not the point of this video. But he did a good video that just gives sort of 10 bullet points that I think kind of reflect the overall consensus with certain Star Wars fans. And so I wanted to just sort of use that video as sort of the base point for the discussion topics because I want it to come from somebody from that perspective. So again, I'm not picking on the guy. It's just it's a more simplified video. It's not 45 minutes, an hour long. It's just more of a bullet point video. But first, I want to talk about a couple of these Reddit posts. What I'm noticing before I get into this is that a lot of this kind of stems from a certain type of interpretation of the prequels. That interpretation isn't necessarily false, but it does go against sort of what George Lucas has always said about the Jedi, that they're good, that they're virtuous, that they're keepers of the peace, all those things. And if that was if George's intention with the prequels was to espouse that perspective, the issue here is that these people are saying that that was a failure. That what they saw on screen, their interpretation of what they saw, showed what Luke Skywalker said in The Last Jedi, which was the whole hubris thing, and that they were bad, and all that stuff, which I hated him saying. Just because one guy made a mistake, Anakin, or one guy over here, doesn't mean you just indict the whole thing. It's no different than if one person of a certain demographic does one thing. It's not an indictment of everybody. There's nuance to life, to reality, to maybe even the Jedi Order. So let's get into this. So this guy says, yeah, Order 66 was possible only because the Jedi Council was blind, especially Yoda. I think I remember a scene from The Last Jedi where Luke talks about it. It is really interesting for me to find out about Jedi ignorance. Okay, so there you go. So that's based on what they're seeing in The Last Jedi. So Rian Johnson, I guess, interpreted the prequels and stuff the way that some of these other guys do, and then reinforced it in The Last Jedi using the biggest, most optimistic character ever, totally different type of guy in that movie, obviously. So that reinforces this person's view, especially Yoda. Yeah, it really stings that the responsibility falls back on Yoda, especially since I really admire the character, but with his actions, he didn't exactly cover himself in glory. I want to know what those actions are. Let me know in the comment section what you think, because maybe you fall into this category of the Jedi were bad. I'm having trouble with the whole idea that, okay, so on the one hand, people say the Jedi got into the political stuff, and they got into fighting the war, and they were choosing sides and doing this and doing that and being very sort of militarily thinking, including Yoda. But then at the same time, Yoda was too dumb to see what was right in front of his own face. So which is it? I mean, if he was really that interested in being part of the war and doing all this stuff, how would he have missed what was going on? And the Clone Wars kind of is another thing that kind of reinforces this, because apparently, I haven't seen a lot of the Clone Wars, but apparently Yoda, there's even more stuff where Palpatine, it's like so obvious and Yoda doesn't see it. I think this guy's video, if I'm not mistaken, gets into that. We'll get into that in just a sec here. Okay, so Order 66 wasn't a tragedy, it was natural selection. The more often I watch the prequels and the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars, right? That's what I was just saying. In my opinion, and you guys, if you've been following me for any length of time, you know that my issues start with the Clone Wars. And there's some lore-breaking issues. There's all types of really stupid stories and bad decisions by the Jedi, by everybody. It was a totally unnecessary show. The prequels didn't need to be fixed. And I don't think it fixed them anyway. I think they're still the same mediocre movies that they've always been. Anyways, the more I feel like Order 66 wasn't a catastrophe at all, but rather the delivery of the intergalactic Darwin Award to the Jedi. Alright. Fair enough. Let's hear what you have to say. Honestly, what we already learned in Episode 2 is enough to raise eyebrows. At the time, extra information from the Clone Wars, and it really looks like the Jedi earned the Darwin Award all by themselves. Jango Fett is the template for the entire clone army. He straight up tells the Jedi that he was hired by someone called Tyrannus. Okay. Yeah, he does. I think he says that to Obi-Wan. Here's my thought. Maybe what George was doing was kind of trying to show... I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. Maybe he was trying to show sort of the innocent ignorance of the Jedi, right? Like, if they were really just peacekeepers for 1,000 generations and they weren't really involved in wars per se, other than maybe saving some people and doing this and that and the other thing, maybe they wouldn't have that military mindset and that mindset of always looking for the issues. And I don't think that translates to hubris per se. It could just translate into apathy, right? They could have just been like, come on, like, we've been doing this for so long, give me a break. I mean, that's a pretty normal human condition. When something's been the same way for a really, really, really long time, and someone comes up to you and says, oh no, it's all different now, it's changed, and there's these bad people doing this, but you don't necessarily see it in front of you, it's probably easier to kind of brush it off. I don't know. I'm trying to go through this journey with you here and try to understand this. And also trying to give George the benefit of the doubt. Jango openly works for the Separatists, and yet the Jedi take his DNA, multiply it 1,000,000 times, and turn it into their personal army. Was it their personal army? I mean, there was a battle going on. There were droids, armies of droids. I think ultimately they were too involved. But again, that doesn't make them bad or make them even necessarily stupid. As I said just a minute ago, just with the circumstance they were in. And I don't think it was their personal army. It was the army of the Republic. Whether or not Jango worked for the Separatists or not. Maybe they thought, well, they're clones. It doesn't matter. If he's a Separatist, it doesn't matter because we're just getting this... We're not getting his Separatist views. We're just getting clones of this guy that we are going to indoctrinate from children. The other thing, too, you got to remember is when Obi-Wan showed up, this was pretty much already done. Well, it wasn't pretty much already done. I shouldn't say that. But there was a ton of clones already made and waiting. And I think if you're Obi-Wan, you're thinking, well, we need something. We got this whole issue going on with the Trade Federation, and we can't have that, so we have to find some way to fight against them. My question with the whole Jango Fett and the clone army and all that stuff was, where was just the regular Republic military? Did they just dissolve it? Did I miss something? Was there a throwaway line somewhere in the prequels that I missed in episode 1 or something where they just don't have a military for the Republic? Because that's my one thing where I'm like, that's a little weird. Okay. Tyrannus turns out to be Count Dooku, the actual leader of the enemy forces. During the war, there are multiple incidents where clones suddenly kill their Jedi. Wait. Leader of the enemy forces. Again, not per se. Both of them were enemy forces, but the Jedi didn't understand that. They were just like, oh, use these clones, save these planets from, the Trade Federation. They're going to take over, and we don't want bad things happening to people. I think there's a naivety to the Jedi. I don't think it's necessarily hubris. I think it's naivety at this point in time. During the war, there were multiple incidents where clones suddenly kill their Jedi commanders. Chip malfunction. That's got to be from the Clone Wars, which, again, is stupid. Clone Wars has a lot of very stupid things. And it's almost like Dave Filoni wants us to reinterpret the prequels based on his view that the Jedi were in fact stupid and full of hubris and not benevolent but naive. You know, like even going back to in The Phantom Menace, you know, when they say they haven't seen the Sith for 1,000 generations, meanwhile Palpatine's right in front of their face, there's Darth Maul. There was a naivety. I think that's what George was trying to convey, a naivety, which would make sense after such a huge, long period of time of none of these things happening. That would actually make a lot of sense. Not, we're the smartest, and so you can't be smart about something you don't understand. Do you know what I'm saying? If they didn't understand it, that's not hubris, that's just naivety. And still not a single Jedi seems to think, maybe something's wrong here. The Jedi know all this, and yet nothing happens. No plan B, no security measures, nothing. Instead, they keep marching side by side with an army that it was tailor-made for them by their enemies. With that much arrogance and blindness, Order 66 wasn't just inevitable, it was deserved. Again, arrogance. I don't see the arrogance of that. I see the blindness. I see the naivety. But again, what would you do? Like, you want to keep the peace. You don't want the Trade Federation taking over planets and using droids to kill everybody. Or kill whoever they need to kill. So in your mind, you're thinking, well, this is what needs to be done. And then you have this thing is spread out all over the place, all over the galaxy. And the Jedi are like, well, we can be used here, right? We can help here. Why would we sit in the temple when there's systems that are under attack? Why would we do that? That doesn't make any sense. And so I get it, but arrogance is where I have an issue, and I don't like that the Clone Wars presents it to some extent that way, at least as far as I know, and I hate that they went that route with Luke and The Last Jedi as well. So anyways, let's get into this video and get into some of these bullet points. This is a super interesting topic. This might be a bit of a longer video, but I think it's fun to discuss because this is an issue with Star Wars fans on the internet right now. Well, it has been for a while.
They were supposed to be the guardians of peace and justice for 1,000 generations. The wisest, most powerful folks in the galaxy, trusted to guide everyone. But what if their biggest legacy was actually screwing things up? What if the Jedi Council, in all their supposed wisdom, kept signing the galaxy's death warrant out of pure, unadulterated arrogance? 1. Ignoring Anakin's trauma. Anakin Skywalker wasn't a typical Padawan. He came to the Jedi as a boy with deep emotional scars, raised in slavery, attached to his mother, and already afraid of loss.
Okay, so a couple things here. Number one, when you watch The Phantom Menace, do you get the impression that Anakin is traumatized? I'm honestly asking. And this kind of goes into, as well, the whole thing, like, why wouldn't they save Shmi from the slavery she was in under Watto? Okay, this kind of reflects this postmodern view of slavery, and everybody just kind of blankets it like every slave in the history of the world, which, by the way, slavery was the money system of the world, was the way the world worked forever until very recently. Almost everywhere. It was, I need a job, so therefore I need a master, so therefore I have a master, I do this for him, he's wealthy, he gives me a place to stay for my family. I mean, look at Anakin and Shmi's apartment. It's not like it's some dump. It's better than a lot of apartments in the world today for people that aren't, quote, slaves. At no point is Anakin depressed or crying or sad. He's actually quite optimistic in The Phantom Menace. Very optimistic. He's going into the pod race. He's got friends that he hangs out with. He's fed. And obviously Watto, as their master, is taking good care of them. This isn't chattel slavery. He's not whipping them. He's not forcing them into horrible conditions, which a lot of, quote, slavery in history was like. In Greek times, in Roman times, obviously, even in those empires, there was chattel slavery, but there was a lot of other, more like indentured servitude. So think about the American slave that was caretaker of the house compared to the one that was picking cotton. The picking cotton people, yeah, that sucked for most of them. It was terrible. Not all, but most. The guy in the house, He's got his own room. He's got a bathroom. He's got, nice clothes. It's not that bad, right? It's actually, it would be like if he worked there and then just went to his little apartment down the street, except his apartment's in the house. So that's what this looks like to me. This doesn't look like, horrible slavery and Anakin's depressed and he can't get over it and I don't get that impression from that movie at all. Let me know in the comment section what you think.
But instead of guiding him through his trauma, the Jedi gave him rules. When he feared for his mother, he was told to let go. When he dreamed of her death, no Jedi offered comfort. When she died in his arms, and he killed in grief and rage, no one helped him process it. They offered silence, not support.
Now, there's truth to this. But again, going back to the whole slavery thing, like people say, well, why didn't they save Shmi? Why didn't the Jedi spend their days going around the galaxy saving slaves? It's probably unrealistic. They were probably all over the place. And two, again, Watto owned her. They're not allowed to violate the laws of whatever planet it is. They're not technically allowed to violate those laws. And that was the law in Tatooine. And again, Shmi was doing all right. Obviously, at some point, the Sand People got to her, kidnapped her. Who knows? If Watto sold her to the Sand People, I don't know. I didn't know Sand People had just slaves. Human slaves. Maybe I'm super ignorant about that. And yeah, that sucks. But at the end of the day, Shmi dies, right? Shmi dies. And Anakin, if he had followed what the Jedi told him, would never have went there. He would have stayed and not ran with his attachment. But he had this dream and he thought, I'm going to save her. And that's a lot of what happens with Anakin is he dreams about something. And maybe it is true, maybe it's a vision, and then he feels like he has to act on that. And what the Jedi were pushing was, no, you don't just automatically just act on that. Calm down, get yourself centered. At the end of the day, his mom was going to die anyway, right? He saw the vision of Padme dying. What ended up happening? Padme died. That's what ended up happening. It's the same reason I get so mad when Luke wants to kill Kylo because he sees a vision of Kylo doing bad things. Well, guess what? Guess what ended up happening? Kylo did bad things. So pulling out your lightsaber and making it even worse and expediting the process of him going into the dark side is pretty stupid. So, but yeah, I think that had to be part of it, though. That had to be his initiation into the anger and into the dark side. That had to happen. But to blame the Jedi, I never got the impression that the Jedi were like somebody shrink. Like, let's sit down and talk about how you feel about your mother. I never got that impression at all from the prequels. It was this is what we're doing. If you want to do this, come do this. But you're not going to have this constant emotional care taken for you. You are to be responsible for yourself and your emotions. So again, I don't see this as a blame the Jedi thing. I think this is just a circumstance. And Anakin deals with it in the wrong way, and that's the beginning of his fall. Which had to how is he going to fall? There has to be a reason.
Rather than helping him understand fear, they taught suppression. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. But denial isn't healing; it's repression.
I think I give people more credit for being able to control their emotions than maybe this person does. That's being a Jedi. Control yourself. Stop being an idiot. Control your emotions. As a parent, I teach my kids, don't let your emotions control you. You control your emotions, not the other way around. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with problems. And then it's like, but he ended up with problems. We need to counsel him. It's like, well, do they? Are they obligated to do that? He got emotional when he should have controlled his emotions. It's that simple, right? It's sad. It sucks. I get it. It's your mom. But his mom died anyway.
When he secretly married Padme, it wasn't just a rule break. It was a desperate attempt to have a real life, something the Jedi forbade. They made him feel ashamed of his emotions. And that shame turned into secrecy, fear, and eventually destruction. In that silence, Palpatine stepped in and became the only one who truly listened.
So the assumption here is that if the Jedi had simply had a sit down with Anakin to discuss what he was doing or something, that would have filled the void that Palpatine ended up filling. I mean, that's a thought, but let's not kid ourselves, okay? Let's not be babies here. Part of Anakin's thing with Padme wasn't simply, I want to have a normal life. I mean, he was attracted to her from the time he was 9 years old. You're an angel and blah, blah, blah. And when he was talking to her in the room in front of the fire, and the way she was dressed, I mean, George. But anyways, he was clearly, lusting after her. It wasn't just simply, I just want a normal life and just hang around. No, he wanted to be the most powerful Jedi. He wanted to be the man. He wanted to be a Jedi Master. He was mad that they didn't grant him that rank. He wanted power. Not just a normal life with a wife and kids. And he lusted after her and got her pregnant. So the idea that he was just this innocent bystander, when he clearly wanted his cake and he wanted to eat it too, right? He wanted to have the woman and have the attachment and do what he wanted and break the rules, while also being a Jedi Master, being on the council, and being revered, and being the most powerful Jedi. That's what he wanted. So he was, his own motivations were his flaw. Because you're not supposed to desire anything necessarily as a Jedi, other than just honing your craft, becoming one with the Force. You don't go into it like, I want to be the most powerful guy. I want to be a master. I want to be this. I want to be that. No, you go into it with, I'm going to let the Force flow through me, and the Force is going to decide where I'm going to get to. And I'm going to do everything I can to facilitate that. So he was, on his own terms, already well off the mark. So I think, and I don't know how much the Clone Wars impacts this perspective that a lot of people have, but I don't think it's correct at all. And I definitely don't think it was George's intention, although he was semi-involved with the Clone Wars. This is what I'm saying. There's so many things about how he handled things that don't make sense to me.
2. Becoming warriors in the Clone Wars. The Jedi were once peacekeepers, but when the Clone Wars began, they accepted the role of generals without hesitation. They led battalions, designed strategies, and took part in galactic warfare. The clone army had been commissioned in secret under a dead Jedi's name, and no one questioned it.
Okay, a couple things here. Like I said earlier, they felt like they had to get involved because they needed help, right? They thought they were saving the Republic, and if you're a Jedi and you heard that some Jedi did it in secret, what would be your initial thought? This is a Jedi. He probably did this because he doesn't want the Trade Federation to know about it. We want to be able to have that tactical advantage. The other side of this, too, that people are forgetting is it's not like they were going into war and killing people. The people were on their side. It's all robots. It's all robots. Why do you think Jon Favreau put the Dark Troopers for Luke to face off against? Because he didn't want to put a bunch of dudes. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you'll kill a stormtrooper. If he's shooting at you, you'll reflect his blaster blade. If he's shooting at you directly, you might do that. But you're not going to rush into a war and just slaughter a bunch of people, right? That was done on purpose, I think, by George. Like, they're fighting a bunch of droids. So it's not the same as if they were fighting a war with people. I think the whole dynamic of how the Jedi would have seen the war would have been completely different if they were fighting a Trade Federation army that was, for example, an amalgamation of a bunch of systems armies or citizens. I think it would have been a completely different story, but because they were droids, they didn't have to feel like they were doing anything bad. Just like Luke in The Mandalorian, he's just killing a bunch of droids. It makes more sense that way. See what I'm saying? So I think there's a little bit of a misinterpretation here.
They walked into war without understanding where it came from or who benefited. Their actions contradicted their values. They said they fought for peace but became soldiers. They claimed neutrality but served the Republic's war machine, one manipulated by Darth Sidious. This shift blurred their moral identity.
I think that's true to an extent. But I think at that point, after 1,000 years or 1,000 generations, how are you going to not be committed? Right? Like, think about Obi-Wan, you know, he brought up the Republic multiple times. You know, he brings it up when he's fighting Anakin. You know, like they were peacekeepers in as so far as the Republic was a functioning unit, right? Because they believed in it, because it worked. It worked for a really, really, really long time. And you could say they were stupid because they took for granted that it was always going to work. Okay, that's perfectly acceptable. Perfectly acceptable. That falls into the naivety category. But if you're going to say that they did it because they were arrogant, I mean, what movies were you watching? I don't get that at all. At all.
The public stopped seeing them as monks or protectors. They became just another military force. That perception allowed Palpatine to frame them as traitors in Order 66, and most people believed it.
Now, was this concept in the Clone Wars? Like, did they deal with the galaxy's public perception of the Jedi in the Clone Wars? Because they don't really in the movies. Palpatine just stood up and said, "This is what happened. They tried to kill me." And then as the audience, you just went, "Okay, well, I guess that's just the way it is." Like, I don't get the impression from the movies, from the prequels, that Palpatine really cared what the public thought. He had so much power. Like, what does he care what the public thinks? Who cares? What are they going to do? And he killed most of the Jedi on the battlefield, where there wouldn't have been any civilians. Or the temple, where there wouldn't have been any civilians. Or very few. You know, there would have been some senators. You know, Bail witnessed some stuff and all that. But, well, and at that point, the Senate totally trusted Palpatine too. So I'm not really sure the public perception thing was even an issue. Whether or not they saw them as just military guys or whatever. And even if they did, if they were fighting for the preservation of the Republic, then why would people be against them? Do you see what I'm saying? Oh, well, they just saw them as military guys. Yeah, but they're helping preserve the Republic that they live in. So why would they be against them? So again, I don't think public perception was even a thought for Palpatine. Unless, of course, in the Clone Wars, they retconned that. Let me know in the comment section, and made that an issue. It shouldn't be.
The Jedi's failure to question their role in the war led to their downfall. 3. Forbidding attachment but expecting compassion. The Jedi Code forbade attachment. Love, especially romantic love, was seen as dangerous. But Jedi were still expected to care about others, to feel compassion and serve selflessly. This created an emotional paradox. Anakin was told to love all beings, but no one person too much. He was expected to care, yet remain detached. His secret relationship with Padme wasn't rebellion. It was survival. The Order gave him no tools to navigate human connection. When he fell in love, they offered shame instead of guidance. The more he hid, the more he feared being exposed.
I think the Jedi offered shame. Nobody knew. The only guy that knew that was Obi-Wan. And he didn't shame him about it at all. Who shamed him? Let me know in the comment section. Was this another stupid Clone Wars thing? Nobody shamed him. He hid it. He chose to do something he wasn't supposed to do. And this whole idea that you can't have compassion and love unless you're having an intimate relationship with somebody like that. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, this is again, it just feels like we're reaching for reasons to say the Jedis are bad. The guy knew that there was compassion and love. He experienced it with Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn loved him when he was a little kid. He was willing to die for him. How is that not showing you how to love somebody without sleeping with them? And showing compassion without Obi-Wan clearly loved him. He was his best friend. He hung out with him every day. He helped train him in his lightsaber. He helped do all this stuff. He loved him. They showed him compassion totally. The only time they didn't show him, quote, compassion is when they didn't just give him what he wanted when he wanted to be a master and he wasn't ready yet. Because the only guy that could kind of see something was up with this dude was Mace Windu. So, no, he was given very clear examples. So I don't see how that makes sense at all. No, he like I said earlier, he wanted his cake and eat it too. He was selfish, period.
Fear deepened into obsession, and when he saw visions of Padme dying, he had nowhere to turn. Had the Jedi taught him to process attachment instead of repress it, the story might have ended differently.
How about if Anakin just didn't do what he wasn't supposed to do, the story would have ended differently. And there's also the argument people make, well, you sent him to go protect this senator, and then, she's super hot. Why would you do that? Well, because that's the point. He's not supposed to be lusting after her. It's not what he's supposed to be doing. And he decided to do that. He's supposed to understand how to control himself. Like, that's not rocket science. Even in your everyday life now, even if you're a teenager, you should still be controlling yourself. Because you could end up in a bad spot. Right? You could end up in a bad spot. You could end up with teen pregnancies. You can end up with all types of stuff that could happen. So the idea that him as a whatever he was, 17 or 18-year-old or whatever, is just not obligated to have any kind of self-control, and it's the Jedi's fault, and they should have helped him along the way, even though he literally was doing what he was doing with her completely in secret. Again, I don't see how the Jedi were supposed to... How are they supposed to help him if he doesn't explain what's going on? Or, again, is this another stupid Clone Wars retcon? I'm telling you, man, if that's what this is, the Clone Wars is even worse than I thought. It just wrecks the whole point. Anakin goes dark because he makes stupid, selfish decisions. That's the whole point. Whereas Luke is the opposite. He's willing to die. Right? Like, that's the point. Until the end that Anakin understands dying for someone he loves. Right? He wanted to bring Padme back because he wanted to bring Padme back for him. It wasn't that it wasn't a situation where he was going to have to sacrifice himself for her. Right? That wasn't the game plan.
Fourth, betraying Ahsoka Tano. When the Jedi Temple was bombed and Ahsoka was framed, the Council abandoned her. Despite her loyalty, they expelled her from the Order and let her face trial. Even after she was cleared, they offered no apology, just an invitation to return, as if nothing had happened. But something had. Ahsoka saw that the Jedi prioritized image over justice. Their decision wasn't based on truth, it was based on fear. So she walked away. Not because she stopped believing in the Force, but because she no longer trusted the Order that claimed to represent it. Anakin, devastated by her departure, saw yet another betrayal, and another reason to doubt the Jedi's wisdom.
Again, this is just Clone Wars stuff. What did she do? Let me know in the comment section. And then that she got her charges were cleared, and then because they didn't say sorry to her, she was butthurt. Is that what we're saying here? And that justifies her being butthurt that they didn't apologize. Again, if they're running around constantly like caretaking emotions, and giving people a support animal and a support plushie all the time, it kind of defeats the purpose of the Order and the whole like let's not get emotional stuff. So if she got emotional and decided she didn't like them anymore because they were mean, well, then they're like, okay, bye. Like, we don't have time. We have things to do. We don't have time to be constantly catering to your emotional needs. That's just not how it works.
5. Misreading the Chosen One prophecy. The Jedi believed Anakin was the Chosen One, destined to bring balance to the Force. But they assumed that meant wiping out the Sith and preserving the Jedi. Yet at the time, the Jedi numbered in the thousands. The Sith were nearly extinct. That's not balance. That's dominance. The prophecy never said who would benefit from balance. The Jedi believed Anakin would serve their vision, never questioning if their version of the Force was already imbalanced. In the end, Anakin did bring balance by destroying both orders. He reset the scale entirely.
Okay, so this is based on a total misinterpretation of the Force. I've discussed this before. George Lucas has made it very, very clear. You can look it up in interviews. The balance of the Force is the absence of darkness. It's not a scale. It's not a scale. The dark side is the twisting and manipulating of the living Force. I mean, this is very clear in the OT. Very clear. And that's why Obi-Wan says to him, you were supposed to destroy the Sith to bring balance to the Force, because dark side is imbalance. Light side is balance. I know it's hard for the kids to understand this. It's not a scale. I know Disney's done everything they can to make it that way. The Clone Wars alludes to that. I know it does, with Bendu's and all this nonsense. And then in The Last Jedi, they put that stupid Prime Jedi thing where he's like half dark and half light. No. That's not balance in the Force. If that was balance in the Force, just think about this. If balance in the Force means equal light, equal dark, what's the point of the Star Wars? What's the point of the Jedi? What's the point of the Sith? It's never going to end. Because the Force is just going to make some... Oh, the Kylo Ren came, so now the Force had to just make Rey, because now we need balance. And then it's balanced, and then now Kylo's dead, so now the Force has to balance it out by making a Sith come out of nowhere now, or a Darksider. So it just never ends. So it's a completely pointless... Everything's pointless. The war's pointless. Luke, what he did was pointless. What Anakin did was pointless. Saving him. Killing Palpatine. What was the point? Another Palpatine's just going to come up at it because the Force needs it to be balanced. Think of how dumb that is. It wrecks the entire concept of Star Wars.
But the Jedi's blind interpretation of the prophecy helped cause the fall they tried to prevent. 6. Ignoring Padme's political warnings. Padme Amidala warned that the Republic was drifting toward dictatorship. She saw civil liberties dissolve in the name of security and emergency powers handed to Palpatine with applause. The Jedi distrusted politicians in general and dismissed her concerns, even though she had seen the Republic's flaws up close.
The Jedi did not have a vote. Like, what are you saying? The Jedi were supposed to like go around and petition the other senators like a lobbyist? You want the Jedis to be lobbyists? Meanwhile, there's a war going on and everything. You wanted them to be lobbyists and go around trying to get senators to see Padme's point of view. That's her job. And she does. And there's some deleted scenes in The Revenge of the Sith that sort of are the origins of the rebellion that I wish that they would have put in. Some people did. Some of the senators did buy into that. You know, you're talking about thousands of star systems. I mean, you wanted the Jedi to run around and try and convince people that things were bad? I mean, you could tell Yoda sensed something. You could tell Mace Windu sensed something was wrong. But, like, your answer was for them to lobby politicians? I just don't see how that's realistic. I don't see how that would have worked. And that doesn't mean that they were discounting Padme. It's just she's one senator out of, like, however many, right? There's tons of them. So that's kind of a silly argument.
Instead of confronting corruption, the Jedi focused on war and internal politics. They grew reactive, not proactive. By the time Padme said, "This is how liberty dies,"
So this is how liberty dies.
the Jedi were already losing their influence. She saw what was coming. They didn't.
Okay, but was there ever any point in the prequels where Padme explained to any of the Jedi in a reasonable way with logic and evidence that, you know, this was going on? She couldn't. She kind of thought so, but she didn't know. She never went up to anybody and said, "Oh, by the way, Palpatine, yeah, he's a problem. It's that Palpatine guy." "Oh, how come? What did he do?" That never happened. So, what was she supposed to do? And the other side of this, too, that bugs me about some of these arguments is it really takes away... It puts all the focus on the Jedi and removes the master manipulation of the Sith. And this, going back to what he said earlier about, there's all these hundreds and thousands of Jedis and there's only 2 Sith. That's the point, though. Is that the Sith are willing to do dirty deeds and lies that the Jedi aren't willing to do. So one Sith can impact hundreds, thousands of Jedi in negative ways because he's willing to do things with a lack of ethics that the Jedi simply aren't willing to do. And so he was willing to manipulate. At no point was his corruption presented in the films as overtly obvious. He presented himself as caring. He's doing what he has to do. He's trying to protect the Republic. I need these powers because it's an emergency and we don't have time to constantly have these votes going on, just like you see in war times in Western democracies. So it's not as if they're just, the Jedi are full of arrogance and hubris because they didn't know what Palpatine was doing, because Padme never explained it to them, because she didn't completely know either. She just sensed it and could see where the Senate was going, but we can't pinpoint who. But it's the Jedi's fault because they didn't know, even though there's this master manipulator, but we're not going to give him credit. We're just going to call the Jedi stupid. I think that just totally misinterprets the story. That's what makes Palpatine such a sick character. And in fact, that's one of a few redeeming qualities of the prequels. There's a lot of stuff in the prequels that I complain about. But the way that Palpatine manipulated and sucker jobbed people and so many people, and doing it as this ultra powerful Sith Lord, you know, that would rival the upper echelons of the Jedi Council guys, maybe even exceed them in abilities, because part of being a Sith isn't just shooting lightning and crap, it's manipulating. And his manipulation of Anakin was culminated in him protecting Anakin protecting Palpatine against Windu, who was probably the only guy that could handle him. Yoda couldn't handle him either. Give Palpatine some credit. Stop making it all about the Jedi are idiots, and let's say this guy is a sick, awesome villain that knew what he was doing. He knew how to manipulate them. He knew how to manipulate his own people, Anakin, and even Darth Maul. It's not like Darth Maul told anybody about Sidious. Dooku didn't make the connection or tell any of the Jedi that Palpatine was Sidious. So he was a master. Let's give him some credit. Stop saying, oh, the Jedi are just these stupid guys that were worrying about a war instead of worrying about what really was going on. They were trying to protect the galaxy from a huge robot army, man. Like, what do you want them to do? You want them to be lobbyists? You want them to just know what's going on? Like I don't understand. Like, basically what we're saying here is we want the Jedi to be something other than a Jedi so that we can say they're not stupid Jedi. And it's not their fault. That doesn't make sense.
7. Dismissing Count Dooku's departure. Before he became Darth Tyrannus, Count Dooku was a wise Jedi Master who left the Order because of its corruption and hypocrisy. He saw that the Republic was falling apart, and the Jedi were complicit. But instead of listening, the Council labeled him disloyal. They ignored his warnings and treated his departure as betrayal. That refusal to reflect on his concerns pushed Dooku closer to the dark side.
Okay, so if you remember when Count Dooku was talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's talking to Obi-Wan Kenobi and he says he's heard good things and he asks him for his help. And then he tells him that the reason he joined the Separatists is that he learned the terrible truth that Darth Sidious controlled the Senate. And then he said, with you at my side, we could destroy the Sith. And then Obi-Wan says, I'll never join you. You all remember the scene, right? So I have a feeling that everything that this guy's talking about is Clone Wars gobbledygook. Instead of just leaving it simplified, that Dooku's motivation was a Sith empire, ultimately. That's what it was. And then they had to do these, Tales of the Jedi, and they had to do all this crap and expand on Dooku's story to where it was like, oh, he's dogmatic about the Separatists and really believes in their cause. And no, he doesn't. He never did. That's all Clone Wars garbage. And it's just another way to make the Jedi look bad. That's all Dave Filoni knows how to do. That's all Disney Star Wars knows how to do. Look at the Acolyte. Look at all this stuff. Like, unless you're suggesting that he was telling Obi-Wan to come help him destroy Darth Sidious, and then he was going to just put down his red lightsaber and bring back the Jedi Order under the Separatists. Really? That's what you think was going on? That's the dumbest thing ever. And even that doesn't work, even within the stupid Clone Wars, because he hired the Pikes to kill Jedi. So, what are you talking about? He was working for Sidious, helping Sidious fulfill his vision, and in the end, when he wasn't needed anymore, Sidious got rid of him. Like, stop trying to make it more complicated than it is. The other thing about Dooku that's sort of stupid too here is that, from this perspective that this guy's giving is that he claimed that, you know, the Republic was corrupt, and that's my motivation, is the Republic corruption. Meanwhile, he's literally working for a Sith Lord. Like, guys, connect the two. Like, think about it, right? And then he's collaborating with CIS corporate heads who are also corrupt. So it was all bullcrap. He wanted a Sith empire. He was working for a Sith. What do you think? He thought that, like, the Separatists were gonna win, and then what? And then Sidious was just gonna be like, yeah, sweet, yeah, let's form a new government with the Separatists. Yeah, of course he didn't think that was gonna happen. It was one of two things: either it was Sith Empire with Sidious, or it was I take Obi-Wan with me, we kill Sidious, and I become the Sidious. That was his mentality. It's very obvious.
Palpatine offered him purpose, something the Jedi denied. Had they taken his departure seriously, they might have prevented the chain reaction that followed.
Yeah, because once again, the Jedi are just obligated to acquiesce to whatever the people within the Jedi want. I'm against the Republic and I'm for the Separatists. Oh, well, I guess all the rest of us are just going to follow you with that then, Dooku, just so you don't leave. Come on.
8. Demonizing the dark side instead of understanding it. The Jedi didn't just avoid the dark side, they feared it. Emotions like anger, fear, grief, all were treated as dangerous and forbidden. But those feelings didn't disappear. They built up. The Jedi taught suppression, not emotional resilience. They didn't show how to deal with pain, only how to ignore it. But when those emotions came crashing in, Jedi had no tools to manage them. Anakin never learned how to grieve or let go. When intense emotions hit, he had no outlet except the dark side.
Anakin didn't want to grieve or let go. He was embracing his grief and transferring it into, how do I save Padme? Because that's how I'm going to deal with my grief, instead of dealing with it internally or dealing with it. He never went and asked somebody to help him. He was like, the only way to stop my grief is to prevent her from dying, and then I won't be grieving her death. What are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to do? Again, it's like, it's baby time. They have to be lobbyists that also are social workers that help Jedi with their emotions, despite the fact that these guys were trained in the temple to not get emotional for years, including Anakin. So again, we're instead of looking at Anakin's selfish nature, that's the issue he could never get past, it's the Jedi's fault for not being a good shrink for him. Furthermore, the reason they don't want to embrace the dark side and anger and stuff like that, or like teach it to people, is clearly illustrated in Anakin. That's why they don't do that. Because if you go down that road, that's what happens. That's the whole fundamental part of the Order. And if that's not good enough for you, and you really just want to be mad, and you want to just let it all out, and, you know, if that ends up in, you know, murder and rage and doing bad things, then I guess you're going to have to leave the Jedi Order and go do that then. Like, the idea that they're supposed to switch the way that they do things to serve your wanting to have an outlet for your crappy emotions that you can't control, the idea that it's their job to do that is ridiculous.
The only place where he felt powerful and in control. If the Jedi had taught emotional balance instead of denial, they might have saved him, and many others.
Really? You don't think they taught that? All those Jedi that were emotionally balanced? Thousands of them? You don't think that when they recruit these kids and teach them in the temple, they don't teach them that stuff? Really? You don't think so, do you? Because one guy was a mental case? I don't know, man. I mean, even Dooku's pretty emotionally centered, even though he went to the dark side. He gives no indication that he's like angry or anything. He's just calculated. Same with Palpatine. So even Sith control their emotions pretty well. I don't see them like raging out. So I don't even know what you're talking about.
9. Failing to see Palpatine's true nature, Darth Sidious hid in plain sight for years. He rose to power as Chancellor, orchestrated a war, manipulated both sides, and the Jedi never suspected him. They blamed the dark side for clouding their vision, but their overconfidence blinded them more than any Sith power. They believed they were too wise to be deceived.
Where does this come from? I don't understand that. Like, when they talked about these things going on, Yoda was like, oh, difficult to see, the dark side clouds everything. They never said that they were the smart ones. They just said they couldn't tell what was going on. And if anything, they were admitting not being able to see what was going on, right? The dark side clouds everything, hard to see, blah, blah, blah. I don't see any arrogance or hubris in that at all. I just see dudes that just can't see what's going on because this is the most master manipulator, awesome villain ever. And he was the only one that was going to usurp them after this much time. There was nobody else had the ability to do what he had the ability to do. Why can't we just say that? Why does it have to be the Jedi were arrogant? No, there's no indication of that in the films at all. Again, if this is a Clone Wars thing, just furthers my perspective of how crappy the Clone Wars is.
But while they debated, Palpatine dismantled democracy. He gained emergency powers, created an army, and turned the galaxy against them.
They did not have a vote in the Senate. They were not part of the government. And even if they had a vote, it's a vote out of however many thousands of votes. Buddy, they didn't have the power to stop him gaining power. Yes, they were blind to what his motivations were ultimately going to be, but they had no power to stop him from becoming what he became. And even in Revenge of the Sith, they want him to. They actually were trying to get his emergency powers removed, but they couldn't because they didn't have the power to do that because they're not politicians.
By the time they discovered the truth, it was too late. The trap had already closed. 10. Wanting Vader dead instead of redeemed. When Luke Skywalker sensed good in Darth Vader, Obi-Wan and Yoda told him not to try. They believed Anakin was gone, lost forever to the dark. But Luke didn't give up. He believed love could reach his father. He rejected both the Emperor and the Jedi idea that evil had to be destroyed. And he was right.
Well, sure. I mean, he showed that attachment funneled through the right way is actually not a bad thing. But that's not the same as Anakin lusting after Padme. Let's not make Luke loving his dad and being willing to sacrifice himself for his dad. Let's not put that on the same wavelength as selfish Anakin not being able to control himself in a myriad of different ways and actually violating the Jedi Order on purpose for his own self. Those are not the same thing. And yeah, if you want to make the argument that made Luke better than Yoda and Obi-Wan, sure. Yeah, that you're right. That's what makes the idea of his new Jedi Order so cool, is because he could probably relate to people in the sense of, hey, you can love somebody. You can't get so attached to them that you're going to do something bad, but you can use your love for good ultimately. And hey, I did that by doing this. Yes, I agree with that.
Anakin returned, not through battle, but through compassion. He destroyed the Emperor not for power, but to save his son. The Jedi had lost faith in redemption. Luke hadn't. That act of defiance fulfilled the prophecy and brought true balance to the Force.
Well, to be fair, Luke hadn't experienced Vader doing what he did either. Right? He met him on Cloud City and did want to kill him. Correct? He did. But he couldn't. And then when he found out he was his father, then it changed. You see what I'm saying? So this idea that the Jedi were stupid because they didn't think people could be redeemed, I don't think that's what they thought at all. I think it was, these guys are so far gone, and so evil and are killing so many people. Think about it. Buddy's killed thousands, tens of thousands of people all over the galaxy. Oh, let's try and redeem him. No, and even Luke wasn't thinking about redeeming him until he realized he was his dad. Because that's nuts. He's a nutcase. He's killing people. That doesn't make the Jedi bad. The reason they let people leave, Ahsoka, Dooku, these people, is because they don't go violence first. It's always defense first. So, but if Vader's going to attack you, you're going to try and kill him. You're not going to be like, oh, Vader. Like, dude, come on. That doesn't make any sense.
The Jedi Order once stood for peace, wisdom, and harmony. But over time, they became rigid, fearful, and reactive. They suppressed emotion instead of understanding it. They chose dogma over empathy.
It's the opposite. They recognized emotion so well that they realized that you got to be very careful with it. That's the point. And Anakin having a meltdown and saying how much he loved killing sand people is the illustration of that, and you literally use that clip. Like, that's their understanding of emotion and what it can do is the reason why they talked about it the way that they did. I'll give you a prime example. When Luke is fighting Vader, his emotions start getting the better of him. At first, he's gold. No problem. Perfectly stoic. And then Vader mentions Leia, and he loses it, and he almost caves in, right? He's angry, and he's swinging, and he's freaking out. And then he stops himself and goes, whoa, what am I doing? This is retarded. Throws his lightsaber away. Becomes stoic again. And then says, I'm not doing this. And so he defeated the dark side with love, not with lightsaber battles. It's one of the problems with a lot of Star Wars stuff in every avenue outside of the movies is they try to do the power versus power thing, which is easier to do writing-wise. But no, Luke is the illustration of why the Jedi understood emotion the way that they did. Yes, you could argue they took it too far because they said you couldn't love somebody or whatever, but they didn't even really say that. They just said don't be attached. But if attachment means throwing your lightsaber away and doing the right thing, which Luke did, that's where Luke's new teaching would come in post Return of the Jedi, in my opinion. Right? Learning to do it that way. But you still can't be just flippantly running around being all emotional. Even in Book of Boba Fett, Luke is pretty stoic. It's not like he's like, you know what I mean? Like,
They prioritized control over truth. They weren't just destroyed by the Sith. They were undone by their own unwillingness to change. In the end, balance didn't come from perfect Jedi or ancient prophecy. It came from love, from a son who believed his father could be saved.
well, yeah, I mean, it was a way to get the job done. Doesn't necessarily mean it was the only way. It's not like the prophecy said, oh, and to do so, you need to have somebody love somebody and throw their weapon down. You know, it's not, you know what I mean? Like again, that's what makes the story of Luke cool and Anakin cool, is that it's something different and new. But that doesn't mean that it's an indictment of everything that came before it just because it's different and new. It's just different and new, and that's what makes it cool and interesting. So this whole thing about like the Jedi are bad, everything was bad, it's all their fault. It takes away all of the very clear indicators that those movies are conveying and that George was conveying. And I think part of it's the Clone Wars. I don't know to how much of an extent. Part of it's all these other things that they've put out that are just wrecking these basic fundamental things from the movies, and these young people are getting completely just their interpretation of those movies is so awful because of it. And the biggest thing is them not understanding that no, Anakin's accountable for Anakin. He doesn't get to blame everybody else because he went down the selfish route. That's what he decided to do. And that's the whole point. That's what you don't do. So that's it, guys. Let me know in the comment section what you think. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. It always helps the channel. Feel free to check anything else on my channel. Have yourselves a really good day.